are at volume 15. That's 150 cases that we've covered so far, and that's just the beginning. As we move into the summer season, we can only imagine what may lie ahead of us on that long and dusty road of uncertainty. There's no doubt that many hikers, campers, and outdoor enthusiasts will vanish in the coming warmer months, as they have in years past. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. Number 10. In May of this year, an unidentified man arrived at the Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado, but never left. He entered the park on May 8th, parked his car at the Sand Pit picnic area, then set off into oblivion. It was nearly a week before park officials noticed something was wrong. It was unknown where he intended to go exactly, but park staff believe he may have been heading to either Cold or Sand Creeks, and ultimately Mount Harold, a 13,000-foot peak within the park. So when the search began on May 14th, they focused their efforts in a 15-square-mile area, utilizing dog teams, 24 ground units, and helicopter assistance. At some point, severe weather moved into the area, delaying search efforts for several days. By May 20th, the search was scaled back, but there is still an ongoing investigation into his disappearance. This was the same park where a 6-year-old boy was swallowed up by the sand dunes of Mount Baldy in 2014, not to be confused with another 6-year-old who disappeared but was eventually found a short time later in 2015. Number 9. In October of 1994, a 34-year-old hiker named Shannon Shell vanished during their hike in the Pincon Mountains of Pimacana, Arizona. She had planned to hike the Tanque Verde Ridge Trail to Manning Camp in the eastern portion of the Saguaro National Monument. This was a 32-mile round trip over rough terrain, which she had previously attempted but failed several times, so she wanted to try again. On the day of her disappearance, she parked her car at the trailhead, locked her purse, money, and jewelry inside, and began the hike. She was carrying food, water, and extra clothing. A short time later, searchers found a campfire ring approximately 6 miles up the trail with footprints and various belongings they thought may have been hers, but they never found any other trace of her. The search involved 24 volunteers and park officials and lasted several days before ending altogether. Friends and family stated that she was a very experienced hiker who knew the area well. To this day, she remains missing. Number 8. On October 10th, 1988, a 28-year-old named Randy Spring was dropped off by a family member in the vicinity of Tipton Road in Whitewater, California. He was last seen carrying an army green backpack at the time of his disappearance and was well equipped for a 3-day hiking and camping trip. Other hikers in the area reported seeing Randy at the base of the San Jacinto Mountains between noon and 1 o'clock that afternoon. Randy told family members he intended to hike the north side of the mountain, but an extensive search of the region turned up no results. His disappearance baffles many, considering he was trained for the wilderness survival during his time in the U.S. Army. Number 7. In August of 2004, a 51-year-old went camping with his nephew in the woods near Warren, Vermont, located on the Granville town line, when he disappeared. Danny Savoy set out to gather some firewood for the approaching night, but never returned to the campsite. The nephew then spent a few hours searching and waiting for his return before notifying authorities. Several dozen search and rescue personnel searched the entire area for several days before ending the search altogether. But despite these efforts, no trace of him was ever found. He left all of his camping and hiking gear behind. His disappearance continues to baffle experts. Number 6. On March 10, 1991, a 3-year-old boy vanished near a cabin where he and his father had been staying at outside of Riverside, California. It was about 10:30 that morning when Travis Zweig had wandered into the bushes to relieve himself. The father was nearby working on chainsaws and noticed something was off after several minutes when Travis failed to return. The father then went in to look for him, but he was nowhere to be found. The cabin was located in a rural mountainous area. Rescue workers and helicopters with infrared technology searched the region, but located no evidence of his whereabouts. Within a couple days of the search, a large storm moved into the area, complicating search efforts. The search was called off after a week when authorities determined that the boy could not have survived the extreme weather conditions. To this day, he remains missing. Number 5. In July of 1988, a 24-year-old hiker named Timothy Barnes disappeared inside Yosemite National Park. He left Tenaya Lakes near Highway 120 east of Tioga Road at around 9 a.m. that morning. He had planned to hike from the Murphy Creek trailhead to Poly Dome Lakes in Yosemite, which are located approximately 3 miles from the lakes. He was then supposed to arrive back by 4:30 p.m. but was never heard from again. Barnes's friends reported him as a missing person to park officials the following morning, and from there on, an extensive search surrounding the area was conducted, but failed to produce any results. He was declared legally dead 2 years later, but his body was never found. Number 4. On September 25, 1981, a 58-year-old woman named Thelma Melton was hiking on Deep Creek Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park of Tennessee with 2 friends when she disappeared. She was last seen shortly after 4 p.m. that day when she suddenly sped up her pace and walked ahead of her companions. The 2 friends saw her walk over a hill on the trail and out of their view. The friends assumed that she had returned to the campground where the Airstream trailer owned by her and her husband was parked. When the friends arrived 30 minutes later, there was no trace of Thelma anywhere. By 6 p.m. that night, word had gotten out to the park officials of her disappearance, where a week-long search effort was coordinated but eventually ended without any trace of her. Family and friends stated that she was familiar with the area and that there was no indication that she had ventured off the path. Number 3. On April 21, 2005, an 86-year-old man named Doug Pierce set out to volunteer at Woodland Elementary and Mariposa Middle Schools, but never arrived. So a search ensued, and authorities eventually located his Ford Ranger stuck in the mud on Chowchilla Mountain Road above Ponderosa Basin near Summit Camp in Mariposa County, California. Authorities stated it appeared the truck had accidentally caught fire and speculated that he became lost when he tried to walk out of the mountains after leaving his truck. To friends and family of Doug, they were surprised to hear of this because he knew that mountain like the back of his hand. Doug was a retired nuclear and chemical engineer and was in excellent health at the time of his disappearance. This case remains unsolved. Number 2. On September 9, 2009, a 61-year-old bow hunter named Melvin Nadel traveled to Elk Mountain in New Mexico to join his two friends at a camp they had already set up. After discussing their plans at 4:30 p.m. that day, Mel's two friends went into the backcountry to begin their hunt, while he stayed behind to build a blind near the camp. When the two friends returned 3 hours later, Mel was nowhere to be found. The hunters became concerned that he'd somehow wandered off and gotten lost, so they blasted their air horns and fired off several shots. After reasoning that enough time had passed, they called the authorities. The search kicked off the following day and quickly grew into one of the largest dragnets that Pecos, New Mexico had ever seen, including dog teams, airplanes, helicopters, ATVs, horsemen, and over 100 volunteers. Despite these combined efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Mel was dressed for the wilderness, armed with both a bow, .44 revolver, and a hunting knife. At one point during the search, trackers followed a set of footprints they believed belonged to him that led 100 to 150 feet away from the camp down a trail and then disappeared. About 10 years earlier, a 71-year-old named Emma Tresp vanished inside that area as well, at a location some folks refer to as Devil's Road. No trace of her was ever found as well. Number 1. In July of 1995, a 37-year-old Massachusetts businesswoman named Jeanne Swartz was driving from Fresno to Yosemite National Park with her boyfriend when they pulled over to stretch their legs. Now here's where things get a little unclear. Depending on where you look, some reports state that the two went on separate short hikes, while other reports say that they each went to relieve themselves. The boyfriend returned to the car and waited for Jeanne, but she was nowhere to be seen. He then spent an hour searching the area but came up with nothing. A massive ground and air search ensued, the largest in the park's history, involving hundreds of personnel. They conducted grid searches on foot, combing more than 40 square miles. They then brought in smoke jumpers and paratrooper firefighters. Search groups from all over the Central Valley arrived to join the effort. But despite all the professional search and rescue resources thrown into this, they still came up empty-handed. On September 3rd, nearly a month after her disappearance, two fishermen found her body 3/4 of a mile from the top of Brida Falls, a free-falling stream that runs off a 650-foot cliff. This area is approximately 4 miles from the point where she became separated, and searchers were baffled how she ended up where she did. Some officials believed that she had followed the sound of rustling leaves in the wind, believing it was the main road that she was parked on. This may have caused her to wander in the exact opposite direction, and by the time night fell, she had completely lost her sense of direction altogether. At first, authorities were unable to determine her cause of death, but then eventually ruled that she accidentally drowned. there you have it. 10 more cases to add to the ever-growing list of mysterious national park disappearances. If you have a case you'd like to update us on, or even if you'd like to bring to our attention, feel free to leave us a comment and we'll do our best to check it out. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos.